Tim, I'm wondering if you can just talk a little bit about, why you wanted to become attached to this project and what your sort of inspiration was.
Sure. First of all, thank you for being here. It's really exciting to talk to an audience. Donnybrook was brought to me by the producer David Lancaster. It's an adaptation of the novel Donnybrook by Frank Bill. I was originally attracted to it. I like crime fiction. I like Jim Thompson, stuff like that. And yet the quality of it had this kind of Jim Thompson meets Terrence Malick in the middle of the heartland. That kind of feeling, and so I grew up in upstate New York, right across the lake, and there are people I grew up with who felt very similar to characters in the novel. So I felt not at home, but like I felt a connection.
This is a little bit different from your previous work. In some ways, you're working with actors in ways that you haven't worked with them before, and I'm wondering if you could maybe just tell the audience here a little bit about how this experience was different for you.
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, my first 3 films, the entire budget of all 3 of them put together was $800,000. So I was used to working small, and I didn't get the opportunity to work with great actors because you can't work with great actors with budgets like that quite often. So I worked with non-actors, and I had my goal was to have people kind of live in front of the camera. What the biggest challenge for me was stepping onto a bigger set with a bigger canvas, but it was to work with actors and get them to trust me that living in front of the camera was something that I could help them do, and in return, they took character and took performances to places that I never would have dreamed of. So it was exciting, a challenge that I think we all reached together.
I think that's a great segue, actually, to maybe opening it up to the 3 of you here. And for me, when I first saw the film, this to me is a film that is a metaphor almost for kind of the state of America today, and asks questions about whether or not the American dream is still possible, and how can you make a good choice when the only things presented to you are shitty choices, and is there any way kind of back from this? But so I'm wondering if maybe each of you could take a chance to speak about what this film meant for you to be a part of, and how you kind of entered those characters, and in particular with reference to the very dark experiences that they're going through.
Yes, I mean, it begins with the script. Tim wrote something that was just really beautiful. He manages to find light in these very dark places. The film, certainly for my character, is a kind of journey film. I think he does represent this sense of hope, that if you can just keep going, and if you just fight as hard as you can, that maybe you will win, and maybe it will be fair, and maybe you will have what you're owed. But ultimately, through all of this struggle, this desperation, this will to survive, there is sacrifices and there is consequence to that. And I think all of these characters through the journey lose either a part of themselves, or they gain something, but they also lose something very valuable at the same time.
I mean, the opposite of hope, and I think my character represents that. Despondent and in the kind of a journey into madness, and where becoming a sociopath, where the one thing that he cares about, he turns on, and just, there's no more moral compass, and it's not even about money anymore, or winning or losing. It's just this journey, and it's a difficult and a departure from, I've played bad guys. I've played the bad guy, and this isn't a bad guy. It's a guy who's just lost it. He's lost everything. He's lost hope. He's lost control. He's lost dignity. He's lost family. And having traveled around the world and around the United States specifically into small communities, this exists. Meth, this epidemic, this pandemic of drugs, of hopelessness, of an America that is not living the American dream anymore. It's there.
For me, it's interesting just because, Delia, the character that I play, is definitely in a really tricky situation, but she's one of the most kind of angelic characters I've ever had the opportunity to play, and the kind of the juxtaposition between these, hard environments and fighting the light within it. Yeah.
I'm going to just throw this back to Tim. We've talked a little bit about dreams here and what's still possible in America, and I'm just wondering if we can talk a bit about yours for a minute. And it's sort of like, do you have a dream project that you've always wanted to make, or, is this it?
Yeah, I mean, I have a dream project. Do you want to know what it is? Yeah, of course. It's an adaptation of a book called Jeff in Venice, Death in Varanasi by Jeff Dyer. It's my dream project, and it goes all the way.
We're going to have to change that title, though.
No. The adaptation, I don't have the rights to the book. The adaptation would just be Varanasi. But all the movies that I've made so far and that I hope to make going forward, they all share the same themes. They're about people in relation to their landscape, their emotional landscape, their physical landscape, the psychological landscape, the political landscape. It's all about how people move within that and strive or die or survive or love and all of that.
And I'm curious, for each of the three of you, is there a role you haven't played yet in your careers that you would like to play? I mean, Frank, are you ever going to play a really good guy?
I just finished a movie with Mel Gibson and Naomi Watts, and I am the good guy, and Mel Gibson is the bad guy. So I got to do that, and it was a lot of fun. It's kind of a like Die Hard meets Groundhog Day, and it was a lot of fun. It was fun working with Mel Gibson, and Naomi's awesome, and so yeah, I was the hero. And you know what? I like being the bad guy.
I guess I just want to, keep working with people that have fun doing what they're doing and are passionate, like Tim is over here, and Jamie and Frank, and that's all. I feel really lucky. Jamie?
You,
I
Mr.
don't
Bell?
know. I really don't know.
Yeah?
It changes. I mean, it's all the words. It's all in the writing. I mean, I like being transported to places through good writing. Tim does that brilliantly. He really does. I don't know. Do you want to? Maybe you could write like a dancing thing for me or something. I'd like to dance again.
Would you really?
I think you'd all like
we
to see
totally
him
would
dance
dance
again,
again.
right?
Maybe you could write a dancing thing for me.
Hey, Tim, let's dance.
Maybe you could dance together.
I don't
mean,
really
Maybe we
like
could.
Yeah, maybe a
Dance.
demonstration.
Plug that in, though.
We'll just talk at the same time.
Can't be musical, though.
I want to open it up to you guys for some questions, but just before we do that, I'm wondering, Margaret, you mentioned the word angelic about your character in this film, and I think it's so true. I also think your performance is so physical and expressive, and I think that's actually true for all of you. There is not a ton of dialogue, in this film. Sure. And I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about how you work with Tim through scenes like that, and what it's like to work with him as a filmmaker, and how you prepare, for this type of material.
Well, I think what I loved the most about working with Tim was that he, obviously everything that's on the page is phenomenal. He's a super talented writer, but then he really doesn't draw any boundaries. He really relishes in the surprises, and I think that's a really exciting way to come to set, to not have your mind set on one specific outcome, but to be open to whatever's happening. And it's scary, but it's fun.
What about each of you? Do you have a good Tim story?
My best Tim story I just told is when Tim and I were in my trailer and we were screaming at each other at the top of our lungs about a scene, and Tim ripped the hat off my head and he threw it out of my trailer, and I think he stepped on it a few times too, and I told him to go get my hat, and he's like, "I'm not getting your hat," and I'm like, I love this guy.
I can be tough, too.
He can.
I don't look it.
Well, then we hugged and we kissed.
Okay, are there any questions in the audience? Is there anything you want to ask anybody on stage? Did anybody succumb to any injuries on set?
Yeah.
I took a beating. I took
took
a little bit of beating. Yeah.
And asked for it.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, I remember not feeling like anything was hurting on the day, and then going home and brushing my hair,
Right.
and being like, "Oh,
Yeah.
why is this hurting?"
She kept telling me to hit her harder, and I'm like, I'm really hitting you hard. Maybe you should think about this. And she was in the hospital for 5 days. I'm like, okay.
No, that's not true. But I will say in defense of producers, there's a huge fight at the end of this movie, a very dangerous fight. And I said, if the fight doesn't feel real, that first 30 seconds, if it doesn't feel real, the whole movie fails. The whole movie fails. And so the most important thing going in for me was realism. But what I learned through intelligence of experienced actors, stuntmen, stunt coordinators was to provide the safest environment, the most choreographed environment possible, and that allows people to really know their part and know that they can make their moment authentic. So there weren't injuries, but at the same time, I watch it, and I've seen the movie 1,000 times, and it still scares me to death. So.
You mentioned an interesting point, obviously. This film, I think it doesn't give much away to say that it does culminate in a big fight. And there is some like boxing and like other, I don't know, cage fighting moves throughout the film. And I'm wondering, Jamie, could you talk a little bit about how you prepared for that part specifically?
Didn't really. I probably should have, is what I mean, I guess. Because it's an integral part of the character. Tim wrote a character who speaks the language of violence, and he's ex-military. He probably did a lot of like wrestling and fighting in the military, and he's well renowned. People know who he is. They know, oh, this is Jarhead Earl. Like, he'll knock you out. So there was an element to that was important, that kind of defined the character. But I felt that I'm just not particularly interested in fighting.
I think also that when Jamie didn't prepare fighting, but as an actor, Jamie's preparation is to go so deep into character and so deeply into the story of the character and the soul of the character that he's fighting for his life. I mean, and it doesn't take skill, it takes heart. And I think that's what Jarhead has more than anything is, yes, he's a skilled fighter, yes, he's a technician, but when he gets in the ring, it's about survival. And I think Jamie brings that as an actor more than as a trained fighter.
Are there any other questions from the audience? Sorry, I'll just repeat the question for everybody. The question was for Frank, and referencing again how he's typically plays, bad or evil characters. And who do you think you are in real life? How do you see yourself?
Yeah, I'm a father. I have 3 sons, and I've been married for 20 years, and I'm quite normal. So it's true, and kind of boring. But I had a TV series called Kingdom that was on for a while. Not many people saw, but it was a character who was not a bad guy, not a good guy, flawed, trying really hard to be better, take care of his family. That's kind of who I am.
Did you study any fighting? Like, how did you work with the choreographers to film it?
What I studied were YouTube videos of Russian gangs fighting in the woods. I swear to God, Google Russian gang fight. They go out in the woods, 20 guys against 20 guys. They walk towards each other, and then all of a sudden, they become this one form of just pummeling each other. And it is the scariest shit you've ever seen. And I went to the producer and the stunt coordinators. I was like, this is what I want it to look like. Can we do this? And, through a process of time, the stunt coordinators often want to build their reel during movies. And so he was like, how about this flip move? And I was like, no. All efficiency, all just trying to stay alive and trying to kill. And so it was a process of elimination more than anything else.
I'm thinking we should maybe explain what Donnybrook means.
Doesn't it mean an uncontrolled fight? A fight out of control? A fight that is out of control?
A melee.
Yeah.
There's the third line in the dictionary definition is chaos, which I also think defines the movie. It is a brawl. It is a melee, but it's also the idea of chaos that extends far beyond the actual Donnybrook.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
so
all very
much.
much. Thank you.